Hi, my name's Allison. I'm going to play a wee bit and then I'll talk. Okay, today I want to talk about shoulder rests and how to pick a shoulder rest. Now, the reason I played something I used to play a long, long time ago, clearly, is just because when you're doing stuff, the reason we have shoulder rests is if I tried to play that without anything, it's just gonna... It's just sliding around on me, okay? So there's definitely a lot of stuff that I personally would choose to play with no shoulder rest at all. And I don't know if you can see, the edge of the violin just sits on my collarbone. Doesn't touch my shoulder. And I kind of support it with the left hand. And for a lot of music, I prefer that. I like having the vibration of the instrument come through my collarbone. It's the vibration is part of what I'm hearing. And I can move. I really enjoy the freedom of that. But pragmatically, it doesn't really work a lot of the time. So, especially when you're a beginner, you don't really know what a good violin posture is in the early time. You haven't developed it yet. So it's really helpful if you have a shoulder rest, and it just kind of helps the violin stay where it's supposed to be. And then as you go along, you kind of acquire a little bit of skill, and you might have more of an opinion as to your shoulder rest. However, so when we're talking shoulder rest, there are there's kind of two aspects to it. Number one is you're just starting the violin and you need a shoulder rest, and you don't really know anything about shoulder rests yet, and you go to the store and there's a gazillion, you say, which one should I get? So I'm just gonna, so that's the short term. So for the short term, what you want is you want a shoulder rest that will allow you to have a good posture. An important consideration is your, how long is your neck and how broad are your shoulders, or not broad. Something that is extremely standard is, I hope, I've got my music reading glasses on so I can't see what I'm doing here, but this particular model is a Mac. It's a Canadian product. I'm very fond of this. This, like any rigid shoulder rest with feet, you apply, can you see? All right, so you start, there's a scooped out bit, right? The scooped out bit is to go over the kind of the hump of your shoulder, right? So everybody says, I don't know which way to put it on, and all my students come and they've got them on backwards, and I'm really uncomfortable with my violin. It's like, yeah. So just look at the thing, and I do this myself some days, because you're busy. Okay, the scoop goes over the shoulder. Hold up your violin, so dunk, it's going to go that way. You just put it over the edge, and then I slide it along. There are different models. The Coon is extremely popular. It's a very good, they've got a gajillion different models. Some of them have folding feet, some of them are little bright colors, leather wrapping. They have a new carbon fiber one, which looks really nice, except the problem is it's really tall. So that gets us into the, how do you choose your model? For me, I have a narrow shoulder and a short neck, so I want something really small. If you have broader shoulders, you might, and this will make a difference in where you, I find that, this is my personal opinion, right? Feel free to disagree with me. I want the rest to be closer to the end of the instrument because my shoulders don't really come out that far. But if you're somebody who's kind of big, you're going to want it further out. You may also prefer an angle like that, or more like that. Actually, I don't think so. So you just have to experiment and see what works best. Another consideration with rigid rests is that, I'm trying to see if you can see this. Okay, the feet usually pivot, and it's kind of a screw that goes into the base. So you can raise and lower. And what usually you want to do is, of course, we don't want the violin to be completely flat. we don't want it to be completely on its side. There's somewhere in there, there's a range of angles that are good for playing, and it may depend a little bit on, you know, your body shape and how you play, you know. So generally you're looking for something that will be wider on the further down side and shorter on the upper side. Okay, so for me this is reasonable. My personal preference is not to use a rigid model unless if I'm playing in a pit or a ballet, or I'm just going to be playing for a lot of hours in a day and it's kind of grinding type of work. This kind of gives me better support because it will actually hold the violin up. I don't have to use my left hand to support the instrument. So that's a little bit easier. It's less strain on the back, less strain on the shoulder. When I have a day like that, this is what I choose. When I'm doing something that's a little more fun, I personally prefer a softer model. And so we get into this whole other spectrum. There are sponges. Okay, I'm going back to if you're a student, what are you looking for? I often tell my students to get, and this particular one is a bit rough looking because I've been scrubbing my pots with it. So I wouldn't use this one on a violin, but I have no more clean ones to show you. These are really, really cheap. I get these at a dollar store in a great big package for $1. And, you know, you take a rubber band, and any system you can devise for holding that on will do the trick. There's one. You might want to use 2 rubber bands so you could, you know, catch it in the middle. It doesn't really matter, just as long as it stays there. Okay. Now this can be a really cost-effective way of just getting going. Okay, I'm fine, because the violin is kind of going to stay there, and it gives you a chance to not waste a bunch of money while you figure out what you'd like to have, because you need to develop a little experience with the instrument so that you kind of, you know, can make an informed decision. So this is something that, and the other thing with a sponge is you take a bread knife and you can carve it if you want it thinner on one side, you know, or shorter, or slice it in half, you know. You can have an arts and crafts day. Here's a model that was available commercially. Now this is a child size, and you can see that this is a slightly more rigid foam. This is like the type you know, if you buy those aluminum packing cases for holding photographic equipment. This is that kind of more rigid foam, and it's got the swoop carved out for the shoulder. And you can see this is a kid model, but I have to say that's just about perfect for me. I could use that quite happily, and you know, the cost is quite minimal. People sometimes use cosmetic sponges. This is not the right type. These are a little bit rigid. The red ones are quite soft and rubbery, and that can work if you don't want any height at all. So, and they go rolling around. So that's sponges. So I said, I've got my cheat sheet. You want to think about how long your neck is. The chin rest that you have on your instrument will have a certain thickness. They also have different shapes. Here's a different one. Here's another different one. A little bit bigger, a little bit flatter. I don't know if you can see. This model, which goes over the center of the tailpiece, is quite a bit higher. So you can get some that are very low and some that are quite high. And if you have a tall neck, you don't want to have a low one, because you're going to be very uncomfortable. You're going to be stuck like that, you know, with your chin. When you play the violin, you want your head. Okay, so what I'm doing, I personally prefer to have, I don't usually wear necklaces either. The edge of the violin sits in the collarbone. When you're a beginner, you may not like that. You may not feel comfortable, and that's fine. If you use a rigid shoulder rest, it will frequently hold the edge just off your collarbone, so that can be pretty good. I like to have it right on, because the vibration coming through the bone is part of the information I need. But so if the violin is there, you want to turn your head and sit it. You don't want it to go turn and way down and your head be bent, because you're going to get neck strain and headaches. So you want to find a combination. Now, there are, you may have noticed when I put the sponge here, it doesn't go right up to the edge. For me, that's good. Some people might say, nah, I need it to cover. So you can play with different things. This little leather pad that I have, this is a Sostenuto brand, and I don't know who makes it. I have in mind that it's French, but it's probably American. This goes, you know, the hole goes over the tailpiece, and you use an elastic band to hold it in place. Now, in this particular case, this covers up the clamp for the chin rest, and for some people that's a real consideration. Some people have an allergic reaction, or you know, sometimes children just find it's very irritating. So you know, if you can cover that up, that's good. In this case, the pad actually comes pretty much up to the edge of the violin, so that's one thing. Some days I have a headache, and this is too much for me because it gives me a little too much height here. But again, you know, whereas if I was to use this, you can see that's out a ways, so the bottom of the violin is just sitting directly on my shoulder rest, on my, excuse me, collarbone. All right, so so we talked about height. You need your neck to be straight. You want your head to be straight. We don't lay our heads down on the violin, you know. Sometimes people think that's the right way to do it. It'll give you massive shoulder and neck pain and headaches. And it's hard to think straight when your head is on an incline, I find. That's personal. Shoulders down. So you want also your shoulder rest to kind of fill up the space. You don't want to be playing with your shoulders hunched, right? So again, that's why these. I unfortunately don't have a Kuhn model to show you, but if you Google online, you'll see them. There's lots. They're good, and there are a number of other similar sorts of things. There's Wolf's. There's a couple of European brands that we don't often see here that are really good. But you see, this will hold the violin up, right? So if I try and lift my shoulder, so this will help discourage raising the shoulder, which is one reason that something like this little pad I like so much may not be a good solution if you're just starting out, because this doesn't hold your violin up. I like that because it gives me freedom of movement, but I've already learned my technique, and I don't hunch my shoulders unless I choose to. So it may not be a good choice when you're just starting. So for later on, once you've kind of got your basic technique down and you're thinking about style, there are a few other issues that you may want to consider. One is, what kind of music are you playing? You know, if you're doing a lot of 4-octave scales or something, this will kind of help hold the violin steady so that you can operate around it quite effectively. If you're doing schmaltzy stuff, my personal favorite, Baroque music, anything. If you're just kind of an expressive person, you like to move when you play, you may prefer this. You know, try, or something of the sort. You know, maybe there's these little pads too. This is a very old model. I kind of suspect it comes from the late 1800s, but who knows? Again, the hole goes over the pin at the end of the violin, and then you attach it with an elastic. And you know, elastics are a little bit of an issue because it's hard to buy good ones these days, but and you need a good one, not the plasticky ones. Then there's just a few comfort issues I just want to touch on before I finish up. Chinrests can be made out of wood. They can be made out of plastic. I have seen a carbon fiber model for sale. I haven't seen it in person. Personally, I find that the wood, I don't like plastic because, you know, I get a layer of sweat between me and the chin rest. If you're starting out and not playing to the point where you're going to get sweaty, that's probably not an issue. Some people, I believe, have a little bit of an allergic reaction. I'm not sure what to, but ebony, in which case you may prefer the plastic one. Or the alternate is there are some chin rest covers, which I think are mostly suede or some soft material. Some people like those. I know there's at least one or two in the market that will also cover the clamp. So if you are having trouble with the clamp, or you have a child who's irritated from the, you know, the metal bits here, you might want to look at the chin rest cover that covers this, and that's legitimate. I think that. Oh yes, there's one more really important issue. Will it fit in your case? A lot of violin cases don't really have room for a great big, especially there's one, I think a Bon Musica model. It's really huge. I know a couple of people have them, they like them, but you're probably going to have to use like a shoe bag and hook it over your violin case because it's not going to fit into your case. So it's a consideration. Anyway, I hope that helps you just give you a few things to think about when you head to the store and have to pick something out. And you know, a last thought on it is ultimately, if there's just a really cool shoulder rest and you like it, you're probably going to be really happy with that. So, you know, have fun.